G'day and welcome to Inforunners. I'm Execute. Today we're joined by Osiris Frost, or Badges as we nickname him, but his real name is Drinking with Gaming Problems, but it's too damn long to fit on the screen. So as an Aussie, I gave him the nickname. Right. So yeah, if you're wondering who he is, it's Drinkers with Gaming Problems. Right. Today we're going to be talking about search and rescue and I guess the overall healing gameplay arc. I'll let you two gentlemen just very quickly in a second tell us a little bit about your areas of expertise. But before we do, I do want to talk about the hashtag Jaden in the comments below for your chance to win an F7A upgrade. His mate Eric passed away, and his mate is looking to give away his ship to a good home. So if you're after an F7 upgrade, they're pretty rare these days and kind of expensive on the grey market. So yeah, it's looking for a good home. So yeah, if you after that, please leave a comment and subscribe below for your chance to win one. All right, so I guess we'll kick it off with Osiris, man. So tell us your area of expertise in regards to search and rescue and the overall healing thing. What do you bring to the table, Osiris?
So I was a combat medic in the United States Army for 6 years, and essentially I was an infantryman with band-aids, is a good way to put it. So,
Sorry,
uh,
but that's
so I'm
harsh, dude. But that's harsh. The visual is so harsh. Like I feel like you were just
less
trying to
the search and
explain like a.
rescue aspect than the providing medical care out in the field,
So
which is sometimes part of the process.
my father's a plumber, and I instantly thought of a man leaking blood and you like putting fingers in arteries trying to plug holes. That's where my brain went. That was so harsh. But that's what I thought of when you said that. I feel so
Yeah.
bad. Oh, anyway, all right.
Well, it's not
That
not too far off the mark, as a matter of fact.
well, with bullets, I assume it would be, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's so harsh. I feel so bad, guilty in saying that. But anyway, Badges, your area of expertise, and what do you bring into the table in this discussion?
Yeah, so obviously I did the search and rescue from the naval perspective for a little while, but currently I actually work in civilian search and rescue at sea.
Yeah. So I think this episode I'm going to be asking lots of dumb questions because I'm a complete layperson. But so what the way we've kind of laid out this episode, we're going to kind of go through what search and rescue is, into the medical stuff, and kind of the whole thing from go to woe. And then we're going to go back and go to woe again, but how do we think they're going to do it in gameplay terms? And the key points that they need to hit. Have I kind of summarized that right in your guys' eyes? Sorry,
Yeah.
I felt very out of my depth in this episode when we were planning it, but I will be asking questions as we go along. So who wants to go first? I think we've got to start with search and rescue first, so we'll probably go with Badges first. So Badges,
Yeah.
start us off. Like, what do you think people need to know about search and rescue?
So search and rescue covers the whole plethora of things. So instantly for me with the game, the first thing I thought of was my ship's being destroyed, I eject, they leave me alone, now I need rescue. But actually it's almost anything where you need someone else to come and get you out of whatever situation you find yourself in or have got yourself into. And that could be anything from what we've just described through to, I'm out of fuel. That happens a lot. And into, our team were deadly injured. We're kind of holed up in the middle of somewhere, and there's no hope of us getting out unless we get someone else to give us a hand.
You've given me my first question. So search and rescue,
Yep.
you think in the terms of Star Citizen? I guess I might
Mhm.
write. Actually, I digress. I'll write it down and I'll ask that again. Keep going.
Okay, sure. And that's kind of the key from our point is you don't make assumptions about the situation that you're going into at all. Everything is a question, so that that because one base assumption, one little assumption that you make about the situation just can throw everything out and put everyone into danger. So you've got to know as much as you can kind of going into it. And I'm sure that's kind of the same with Osiris's experience.
My mother was in my room today and I could not find my pen. Thanks, Mum. Anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Did she clean up your room?
Yeah, she's terrible. Like, I hate it. Like, she's one of those mums that just comes around and won't stop touching things. But anyway, sorry, I digress. We're getting off topic. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll pick up on that thread, and I'll say that in a nutshell, the American conception of combat medicine was born out of statistical analysis of the Vietnam War and what we determined was that there are a small handful of combat injuries that you can do something about if you have the right equipment and the right training. There's a lot of things that you can't do something about, and you have to kind of just write those off. So, the premise of of field medicine as it applies to a search and rescue situation is your patient treatable? Can you stabilize them and transport them in a timely fashion to a medical facility that has better capabilities than what you have on your person?
Because
And
obviously,
interestingly,
there's
sorry, go on.
I was going to ask. Obviously, there's a from a layman's side of that, looking at it from the other side. There's obviously an expense there. It's too expensive to have all those fixes for all the things that could go wrong in every single place, and you're also in a combat situation, so it's not safe for those people to be in that
Uh,
position. Yeah.
I'd say it's less about expense.
No. Okay.
Especially, I mean, if you live in an industrial culture, you can mass produce a lot of like a tourniquet, for example. That's not really a limiting factor. What it is you can't carry around a full surgical suite in your backpack.
Yeah.
It's just
In a
not
combat
practical.
zone. That's what I meant.
Yeah,
Like, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
right.
Cool. All right. Where were we? We're up to, okay. So do we still need to go more through the search and rescue stuff? And so you in the notes here you put down 3 things to consider in search and rescue. So do you
Yeah.
want to go through that for me?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in very layman's terms, there is what is the situation that I need to go and address? What do I need in order to address that situation? And then the final thing, which is what else could go wrong? So, I think the way we framed it was, um, you know, someone needs recovering, they've ejected. I therefore need to go and take my ship that's got space for them. They might have injuries, so I'll make sure I've got a med ped and a couple of med pens, med guns, and then oh god, they're in the middle of a battle with a Vandal, so that probably changes what I need to bring a little bit. And then it's everything else, the idea that people can get trapped on ships, the idea that we've got breaching charges and cutting guns and all that sort of stuff, I think is going to really inform people that want to get into search and rescue, kind of how they do that. But in very basic terms, because like I said, you don't want to make assumptions, so it's hard to get more specific without beginning to form a scenario.
Okay. And from the other side of the coin, Osiris, the things that you got me to write down here. So you were saying, you mentioned the golden hour.
Yeah. So, in real life medicine, there's a concept known as the golden hour, and essentially what it is if you sustain a life-threatening injury, the odds of you surviving that drop precipitously after the first hour has elapsed. So it's very critical. That first hour is very critical that whatever kind of care you can get to stabilize you, whether it's blood loss or a compromise of your airway, whatever it is, it needs to be done quickly and effectively. And so to that point, if your survival strategy flying around the verse and Star Citizen is, I'll just use a distress beacon if I break down or if my ship gets blown up, you need to carry stuff on your person to provide self-care, to buy yourself more time for a rescuer to get to you.
And I guess that's kind of what we've got a bit in the game at the moment, just that really basic level.
The
But
med
at the
pen,
moment,
yeah.
yeah, but at the moment it's a cure-all, and that's set to
Yeah.
change. It's
Yeah.
that's where we're going with that. All right, so that's kind of. Is there anything else you guys feel that you want to add to what you've stated there, or do you will kind of want to move on a bit now, more into the rolling that into the actual game?
Sure.
All right. Anything else from you, Badger, or are you cool to roll that over?
No, I think I think it's like I said, without becoming hyper specific about one scenario and potentially missing out a whole bunch of other stuff. I think we start relating it to the game. We
Before
can
we
be
do,
specific.
I got 2 questions that came out of the things I was. The first one is for. I guess you can both answer this one, and it was when you mentioned repair and stuff. Is like, how much is repair going to be a part of search and rescue? Because we know we've got things like the Vulcan and that, and the ships themselves are almost akin to a player in a way. So how often do you think you'll see something like an Apollo and a Crucible rock up to a situation? And I am asking you to speculate here. I know I'm doing that, but
Well, I can jump in on this because
Yeah, go ahead.
it's not the case everywhere, but in a lot of jurisdictions here in the States, so our emergency services line is 911. If you dial 911 on any phone, it will summon the first responders. And in many jurisdictions, it's just statutory that if you get a 911 call, the police and the fire department and the ambulance all go to that call, because spending time waiting to figure out who's actually needed might be that small amount of time that would have made a difference. So I think it's entirely reasonable that you're going to have Vulcans and Apollos rolling in together.
And maybe say something like
Yeah.
Crusader Security rocking up too. Okay, I never thought of that.
Saying before, like something that he deals with in search and rescue sometimes is you're out of petrol, and
okay. I never. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. That's obviously different. So I'm a layman. I wouldn't have got that, but yeah. That's very interesting.
And an interesting thing, especially when you're rescuing from an organized perspective, i.e., a government search and rescue. So whether you're police, fire, Coast Guard, whatever it is, you can't rescue people who don't want to be rescued. So if you're going to
that's
a ship, absolutely, yeah, you're going to a ship that's of high value, and they will only want to be rescued if you can guarantee to them that their ship is also going to be rescued. Whereas, if you're going to maybe a couple of people crammed into a 300i, for example, they could probably take the hit, just get off and come with you. Whereas if you're going to rescue something of considerable worth, the other thing you talk about, the synergies, and at the risk of derailing things a little bit, the other synergy I see, definitely with repair, is also salvage.
Yeah,
because you earn the money. Not only do you earn the money from the rescue, you then get to do whatever you want with the wreck.
It's funny you mention that, because I did think of it, but I didn't know if I should bring it up or not. But the one I'm thinking of is in that cinematic we saw when they were flying through the planet a couple of years ago, and she was literally talking about where this is legitimate salvage, we have a right to do this. It's almost like they're vultures turning up to pick the corpse. I wonder if we're going to see that, like when there's a Crucible team drop. By the way, we brought F7A and the Reclaim, but just in case, just in case there's a bit of profit there.
And it could tie into the legal system in that if you're two commercial entities, if you own, if you're a bulk carrier or something at sea, a cargo ship, and you come across another ship in distress, you can enter into in international law a salvage agreement. So until you are relinquished from that salvage agreement, that ship's now your responsibility. But it also stops anyone else being able to claim salvage over that vessel. So with the legal system, you've now got the possibility of legal versus illegal salvage. And then with the reputation system, well, I'm sorry, we're not employing you. You have a reputation as an illegal salvager, and that is not something our organization is willing to engage with.
And that'll obviously change from system to system as well. And I actually reckon that's just not just salvage. That might even be repair and medical as well. Like in certain systems, you might. I'm going to jump forward a little bit here. You talked about a thing called Solace. That could be different from system to system. Take Stanton or Pyro. And Solace, by the way, is saving lives at sea or in sea. And I just changed it to in space. It's exactly the same acronym. It works for both. So, yeah, if you want to know, do you want to explain Solace a little bit, just a little bit for people that might not be aware?
Yeah, so Solace is effectively Solace and something called IAMSAR. Basically, the international framework for everyone got together and went, how are we going to balance every country providing some sort of search and rescue service? And that is just as dodgy as it sounds. Certain countries provide a much better level of service than others, which is probably exactly what we're going to get in the game with commercial. You're probably going to have people rescuing effectively at gunpoint, and others who are
get in the ship. No, I'm rescuing you right now.
Yeah, I don't have the time for this. Okay, yeah, sorry. So there's going to be that aspect to it as well. But Solace basically says, here's all the areas that you are responsible for, and this is, we basically say you need to hand people off, and I think this links into something Osiris is going to talk about. You need to hand this off to a place of safety. And where I work specifically, that is the next level of medical care. We provide what's called first stage medical care, which is very, very basic. We can try and kind of resuscitate someone. We can grab one of Osiris's plasters and stick it on a hole, and that's about it. The next stage for us is passing someone to the ambulance service.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. So you're essentially, and I'm going to ask a question here. I know this is slightly off topic, but do you, that's why I've always wondered. Like, I don't see the Apollo as an ambulance. I've always seen it like a search and rescue helicopter. Now, I'd like to get both of your intakes in this, because I know a lot of people say it's an ambulance, but I've always seen it as that, like a first responder that's just trying to stabilize you with the really most basic medical care and then get to you to an Apollo. Now, the Apollo to me feels a lot more like an ambulance. Is that correct in my assumption, or am I completely off the mark?
Sort of. So CIG is obviously, I mean, like right now they're kind of taking flack over the Rock DS, right? Like their gameplay design approach is extremely granular. And I guess what I would say is if they're basing medical gameplay off of real world scenarios, then it sort of goes back to what I was talking about, where there's like only so much you can do for somebody where they've been wounded. You can do a little bit more between there and a medical facility, but the Apollo is not going to be a fix-all. You're not really, if you're seriously wounded, you're not gonna have an Apollo show up and take care of you 100%, and then you just go back about your business right then and there. The Apollo's purpose is to get you to survive long enough to get to an aid station or a hospital.
That's how I see it, and the way I came to this conclusion is there is like it has a level 1, 2, or 3 bed in it, but so does other ships. So how is it any different from other ship? It's just a more ship dedicated bed. And so my feeling, like when you look at the Cutlass Red, it only had level 1 beds or level 3, sorry. And so when you actually, or the lowest level of bed. So when I worked that out in my head and I went backwards, I'm like, well, that has to be the lowest level of beds. What's lower than that? And you've got those med tools, and that's just the most basic level, but anyone can have those. So isn't that just, as you put it, fall under self-care? So therefore isn't the first kind of medical level those lowest level beds? And to me that just became first responder. And they even call the ship a search and rescue ship. And in Australia we have a thing called the Westpac helicopter, and that basically goes out on the oceans and pulls people with ropes, which I'm sure this is in your area of expertise, Badges, out of the ocean. And they do have very basic level medical facilities on that. But they're essentially, as Badges said, just they take people straight to shore and chuck them in an ambulance, and they do the next level up, and then they get you all the way to the hospital, and then they do it in hospital. And so to me, that's your level 1, 2, and 3, just like the beds, ironically. And that's how I see it. So I see it as it's not an ambulance. I don't know. You correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I see it as a search and rescue. I don't see it as an ambulance.
Yeah, I mean, it will do the job of an ambulance. You know, in exactly the same way as a Black Hawk with miniguns in the doors will do the job of an ambulance. It's just massively over-engineered for what it
Right.
You know, it's an ambulance with a missile rack, the medevac version.
Has
but
more
if you look at
capabilities than a single individual.
Absolutely. And when you look at
sorry to be clear. So what I'm saying is I don't think the Cutlass Red is an ambulance. Do you agree?
It's a budget ambulance.
It's the closest thing we have to an ambulance.
It's an ambulance in a third world country.
Yeah.
See, because to me the Apollo is an ambulance. That's
the Apollo is. I would definitely, if I was in need of search and rescue, I would feel a lot better about my prospects if I saw an Apollo coming at me than a Cutlass Red.
Yeah.
Cutlass Red's probably fixing you up enough to sell you at a slave market or something.
I think it's got like scanners and stuff on it. It's more about finding people. Where I think to me, as I said, I've said it 3 times now, I think the Apollo, and I've had people argue me tooth and nail over this because they don't want the Cutlass Red to be that, but I just think the Cutlass Red is not an ambulance. I think the medevac is, but anyway.
The interesting thing, again, going from, this is obviously going to be a very different point of view to what Osiris has, but from a civilian point of rescue, whether you are being rescued by a fully capable lifeboat or a helicopter, or whether what is rocking up is basically some dude in a wooden boat with oars, the fact you are being pulled out of the water is the primary concern, right? Safety looks amazing regardless of what it actually is.
I guess
Yeah.
whatever's
Triage is all relative.
yeah, isn't
Yeah,
it always like
absolutely.
something that's better than it is? Like it's all
Yeah.
stepping up to
Yes.
medical care. So yeah, I guess
Yeah.
like out of the water is the first step, and then everything else after that. Yeah, it makes sense when you say it like that.
And it's the capabilities of the Apollos that they have drones that can just recover people. So it's not just that you can deal with more people, you can deal with more people faster.
Yeah.
And
So
that's then going to the risk that sorry.
Well, there's a trade-off too where we don't know if exactly what size the Endeavor is going to end up at, right? But like its hangar was pitched as being able to fit Cutlasses. Now it may grow to the point where it fits Apollos or whatever. The Kraken, same thing. Like an Apollo may or may not be able to land on its landing pads. I'm not sure about that, but it can definitely fit a Cutlass. And John Crew has said that the Kraken will probably end up with some kind of medical facility. So it like Badgers was just saying, if the Cutlass is the equivalent of an old man with a wooden dinghy pedaling up to you, if all it's doing is getting you to the Kraken or to the Endeavor, then it is a slight improvement over where you were at.
Yeah, and I think I mean I might have to be a little bit contrary. In my head, the Cutlass is more fulfills the ambulance role because it is purely transitory, as Osiris has just said.
Yeah, okay.
It's not a solution in and of itself. It's the lowest grade of medical bed. 1-3. I get this mixed up all the time, but the fact that you can change out the medical beds in the Apollo for whatever grade that you want, and it just affects the number that you can have. I think something like that is a lot more. It makes it more specialized. It's obviously going to be more costly to run.
So to look at it in a way, like because it's in the future, it's just a more advanced version of what we have now. So if you think about it, like if we went forward in future and there's new medical technology, the Apollo is kind of like an ambulance. Oh, sorry, the Cutlass Red is more of an ambulance of today, and that is more of an ambulance of tomorrow. Would that cover?
Yes.
Yeah, sort of. So sorry, but
Sure.
to kind of borrow some terminology, it's sort of like akin to the distinction between Casovac and Medevac, right? And so Casovac is if you and your friends were screwing around in the outback and somebody got bit by one of the millions of extremely venomous things that live in Australia.
Yeah, sure.
And all you had was your truck. You can use your truck as an evacuation vehicle. It doesn't necessarily have any medical capabilities on it, but throwing somebody in the bed of your truck and driving to a hospital is a better outcome than standing there and waiting for an ambulance to arrive.
That's correct.
So they've talked about how like the repair gameplay is going to be necessary for the addition of pyro. I think that maybe the Apollo is going to be necessary for the addition of pyro, because if you are way out at the ass end of pyro opposite the jump point to Stanton and you are in need of rescue, then you may need a ship as sophisticated as the Apollo to even logistically survive long enough to get back to Stanton.
So it's like stepping.
Cutlass might not be good enough.
To take your example of like when you're out in the bush, so you go from a trucker or a ute, and you get to the nearest Cutlass Red. You go from the Cutlass Red to the Apollo. You go from the Apollo to an Endeavor or whatever, and then to a hospital, whatever. Like you can see that chain of events of them just like pushing you up the bed levels and stuff like that. To get to that top level bed, so you're getting the care that you desperately needed and get you out of critical status. I can see that, and that's how it happens in real life, and I have no question that that's how it will happen in game too. I'm gonna pivot slightly here, and go into. I wrote it down in the notes of expectations of player recovery versus NPCs, and one of the things you guys brought up after I wrote that down was my first thought was like, I think in most cases that you're going to be dealing with NPCs that you're going to be rescuing, but then you guys brought up the point about the what did you say, Osiris?
The death.
The death of the Spartan, but your option to wait. You were talking about that, Osiris. Yeah. So can you go into that?
They have talked about this a little bit in the Death of a Spaceman and the updates they've given to that. So essentially, let's say that you get, I don't know what the terminology is, but let's say you get incapacitated in game, right? And now you probably are going to get something like a pop-up appear on your screen, and it would say, would you like to respawn? And you can fast forward to the point where you wake up in the hospital, but it will have some sort of deleterious effect on your longevity. Like it'll take away a life, basically, or however they phrased it in the Death of a Spaceman article. Or you can wait, and maybe that rescue will come
and save a life. And guess
it's
what?
kind of like at that point, it's kind of like the golden hour, but for game purposes, it'd probably be more like the golden 10 minutes.
But you've hit on something really important, because people have always wondered how that's going to work with the FPS mechanics, like where you're getting injured more frequently, and that's how. Because if you can be saved and you are happy to wait 30 to 40 seconds or a minute or however long it takes for your friend, the medic, to get you up, and you say it saves your lives, boom, you can see the full gameplay doc now. You can see that loop, like how they're because everyone was worried that you if you play FPS, you're going to be dying heaps. But that's how. If you were happy to wait and be res, and how many games have you played? Just by the way, I'm thinking Team Fortress 2 or Battlefield, the number of times you run along with a needle trying to get to the guy and they tap out just as you're trying to res them. This game's going to stop that, because there's a punishment for just like dropping out. So I actually welcome that. Medics are actually going to be able to do their job for a change, which is fantastic. Next thing I want to move on to is examples of I've wrote it down as pinging, scanning, and transponders. So do you want to take that one, Badges, and we'll go over those?
Yeah, so we're basically talking about SAR, search and rescue. Whether or not the S and the A are going to be any use, or whether it's just going to be R. And the idea being, how do you find people? Obviously, for my line of work, the first question we ask is, where are you? Because I can deal with everything else. I don't need to know what's going on. I don't need to know how many people I'm after, not straight away. What I need to know is, where are you? So I can start sending things to you. And I think that's where these things come in, because there are loads of examples in the real world that would be, I'd like to think, fairly easy and build on existing systems within the game. Now, if you need rescue and you go, right, create contract, rescue, create beacon, and that beacon sticks to you in the same way that a bounty beacon sticks to you, then search is out clearly. But if it does what it does when you scan and you're looking for minables or whatever else, and it just gives you a whopping great box, it goes, right, somewhere in there, off you go.
Yep.
And maybe that doesn't necessarily, the center of that box isn't where you are. Now we're into search. And you can use things like, so one of the beacons that you would put out would be, this is my position. That's the beacon stuck to you, like the bounty. One of them is a transponder, which is when something gets close enough on the radar, it starts to see it. And that could be the 3D radar that we use in game. Maybe it's a pulsing signal. The closer you get, the faster it pulses. But it's not on your screen all the time. So you're actually having to look for it on your radar, as well as keep an eye out so you don't run the poor chap or chapette over.
I like the fact that it also could be audio based as well. So it's taking it off the HUD, and also you can have both. You get a visual element and an audio cue. I really like that when we talked about that before. I'm sorry, setting it up. Continue.
But things like that would be an EPUB. As long as you kind of trigger that and you stay in the same position, a beacon that stays on you, or even if it's just a fixed point in space, well, I've sent that. People will know where that is. It doesn't have a battery life. I'll just hang around here. As long as I've got enough oxygen, I'll be fine. Or as long as I'm not in danger on a planet, I'm not cooking, I'll be okay. The idea with some of the other things is they don't last that long because of the amount of power needed to create that signal. So it could be something of, I've just heard a crackle of comms, or I can actually see something moving. I hope it's a rescue, and now I'm going to click activate and see if they come to us. They might just ignore me. I don't know.
Kind of like firing flares up at a plane or something akin to that.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. But at least to hasten or speed up them finding you.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think we'll come back to that right at the very last note that we've got written down. That'll come right back at the very end of this episode. Before we move on to the next one, Osiris, I had the question I wrote down for you here. was medics having bigger. You know how we know we've got the multi-tool med gun, but they've also made bigger, like a bigger med gun. So for me, I think it's very logical that everyone would have the self-care of the multi-tool, but it's the medic that'll have that bigger medical gun.
Yeah.
And I guess my question for you is, how much better is that going to be? Like, how does it just do it faster? Does it the same?
Well, okay.
Or is it? Or
This
is
is
it?
where we get
Is
into a
it
little
like
bit
the?
of the theory crafting.
Yeah, but is it like the beds? That's my question. Is it a
I
speed thing, or is it? Yeah, your call.
so I guess I would maybe tie it into a point that's a couple things down here, but
Mhm.
when I think about how the implementation of this, I think about a game like Star Wars Galaxies, and if anybody has ever played before, when you got hit, if you
Oh, I think we just lost Osiris.
get shot or stabbed
Oh,
or whatever,
he's
you
back.
take damage out of your hit point, which diminish the capacity. Did you hear any of that? Did I break up?
You broke up and went really fast for a second. So just repeat what you're saying. It'll be fine.
Okay,
We'll keep
so
going.
in Star Wars Galaxies, you could take damage and you could also take wounds. And what wounds were is they diminished the overall capacity of your hit point pool. And there were further like injuries. Like if you took a wound to the head, you could possibly be concussed or you would be temporarily blinded or something. So
Yep.
I think the Grey Cat multi-tool is nice and it can probably just give you a temporary hit point buff effectively. But the larger medical gun can probably get consumables, sort of the way that mining heads do,
Yeah.
that are specially based on different types of injuries, and they can possibly heal wounds, but they can possibly also mitigate specific injuries like a broken limb or blindness or confusion.
What I was thinking, what you were going to alluding to, but you didn't, was let's say, for example, like you know how we were talking, and we are jumping ahead here. I know that, but so when you are healing, there's only a certain number of heals that you can get before you actually have to go back to a hospital. And the example I gave to
Yeah.
you guys when I was explaining it is like how they've explained the wear system on the ships, and they've actually said that as they wear, eventually you'll have to go back to a showroom and get it repainted to look like the original condition, and your body will probably be the same with medical. What I'm
Most
thinking though
likely.
is you'll probably get more uses out of a med gun from a medic than you would out of a med gun for yourself. I think
Probably, yeah.
So you might, and this is total speculation. Like you might get double, so 20 out of a med gun and 10 out of the other one. That could be how it's done, and I think that would probably be what I would lean to. But I also think the things you mentioned are correct as well. That there, more things it can do, but also it does them better. Yeah, essentially. Do you want to talk about the time missions from the Golden Hour and the Medgun stabilized hospital type stuff?
Yeah. So, again, to draw it just back into my professional background.
Mhm.
So, if you're a combat medic and you're engaged in a firefight and somebody in your platoon gets injured, wounded, then you would provide point of wounding care. But at the same time, you or somebody else should be coordinating the casualties' return to the nearest aid station. Uh, and they should be coordinating like an aerial medevac to come and take them to a combat hospital. And the way it works for American forces is you could be in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever, you get wounded, and within 24 hours you're in a hospital in the United States, because everything is just it's like bang bang bang, stabilize and transport, stabilize and transport. And each stop along the way has a little bit better capabilities. They can treat a little bit more, and the goal is to get you stabilized to where you can move on to the next step, so that as quickly as possible you end up in a real hospital somewhere that it's like it's modern medicine, and they can do everything that can be possibly be done for you. So I see this gameplay from the medical side uh, as being a series of timed missions, probably. And what you're doing is trying to extend the timer or slow the timer down
With
through
different
mini games.
and different beds and
Yeah,
different. Yeah, okay,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I get that. I get that. I've just picked up on something that they talked about years ago, and I'm actually now cross pollinating the last 2 points you've talked about. And they were talking about the more damaged. Um, they gave an example of a leg. So, you know how we were talking about the number of uses from the med gun and stuff like that before you have to go to a hospital, you might get to a point that say you get to 75% of your leg usage, and so that starts to slow you down. And in a combat situation, you might not want to get to 25% because you can barely even, you're moving at 25%
Yeah.
speed. So also, I think a part of the medical part will be the medical officer, so to speak, going, right, you're at 50%, you're just too bloody slow, you're going to get shot too frequently, go get your leg fixed and come back. I don't know, do you, as a medical person, is that, because I know you guys have to do, what do they call that, triage, or as in work out the order of like how people, how stuffed people are up?
Well, right, yeah. So far, what we've been talking about is essentially if you roll up on a single casualty, but there are also multiple casualty situations or mass casualty situations, and that's a whole different can of worms. If your medical resources on hand are overwhelmed by the amount of medical need in that situation, then you have to make decisions about who can you help, what's the best, most efficient way. That's what triage is what's the most efficient way to deploy your resources.
So I guess what I'm asking is, that makes a lot of sense to me from a gamification point of view. Does that make sense to you? Okay, cool. That's what I was essentially asking. All right, so we've gone over that. We've gone over... so you brought up an example of the armor mod, and you brought up Star Wars Galaxies as well. So do you want to go over the armor mod stuff as an example, Badger?
Yeah, so the idea of Ace Medical, basically, for people in the FPS sort of situation, gave everyone the option to help with a casualty. So if you understood the medical principles, you could get involved and start treatment yourself. If not, it would take someone like Osiris to say, right, I need you to put this type of bandage on that wound. You give him an injection of this. No one else give him an injection of anything. You just, and so on and so forth. And one of the things you could do was you just do CPR. And CPR would just extend the timer by like a minute. So even if you had no idea of what was going on, you had no experience of medical gameplay, someone could just say, just do CPR on him, and you're able to help and kind of prolong that, the time before they're dead, and that's the end of it. And what was great, the way it worked so well in Ace, was if you had someone who was seriously injured, it become a drain on manpower. So you could reach a point where you were completely combat ineffective because you had so many people dealing with casualties who should have guns up and covering angles are now not able to do so, and now you're in serious danger of being overrun because you're not watching all of the directions you need to watch.
That really actually kind of...
well,
it shows you this perspective, though, of like how you're going to have to help each other as the squad, so to speak. Yeah, that's just something I never... I'm just thinking to myself, like, seeing all these layers to get to the medical gameplay that I just hadn't hit before. It's a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be, and it's kind of really cool.
Yeah. So
and,
I mean,
and there's
along that line, another thing to think about is, so like in the infantry specifically, when you're in a combat situation, every soldier has on their person something called an individual first aid kit. That's for you, you don't take your individual first aid kit and help somebody else. You take their individual first aid kit and help somebody and help them. So that's because the medic can only carry so much in his backpack, and there's typically one in a 30-man group. So if you're think about like going into Hurston where the bunker missions are, you go down to a bunker, and somebody in your group gets shot by one of the NPCs, you need to run over to their person, use what supplies are on their person, because once they get transported out to the hospital, their medical supplies tend to go with them, right? So in it just adds this whole other layer of preparedness, and even people who aren't in there for the medical gameplay need to have a little bit of capability.
Do you think that'll carry across though with gamification? Do you think that they'll just let you use your own, or do you think
you to an extent it already is, right? Like you can they have that thing that they just talked about in the episode this past week where like you can grab a usable item out of somebody's hand, and that's a bug. It's not a feature, but if you could take somebody's medipen off of their bandolier and you could inject them with their own medipen, that's actually a feature. That facilitates gameplay.
Sorry, just hold on. I'm just going to move this grenade.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
You can't
But
have it
anyway,
both ways. You got to be able
yeah,
to
yeah.
grab anything
Just
you can
gonna
grab. But
amputate your legs, Badger. Here you go. Woof.
Yeah, please don't.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be one of those things that stuff like this, stuff that Osiris is talking about,
Yeah.
that level of organization is going to be what makes a good exploration team different from a great exploration team. Is great
Yeah.
exploration, it's all going to be about, right, everyone make sure you have a minimum of a splint and a morphine pen and whatever they end up being called in game, and having those supplies and actually making that judgment call, as you were saying, I think, with the right, you're 50% damage now, we need to do something with you, is the point at which you go, do you know what? It is no longer worthwhile pursuing whatever it is we're doing. Now we need to move on to, now we need to think about preserving the crew, not becoming casualties ourselves, which is kind of the core to search and rescue, really. It's not becoming a casualty.
My brain just went a little bit off topic, but I just want to put this idea in your head. I don't really want to talk about it. But what if you could actually take real world objects, as in the game, to make splints? So you can imagine a guy that's got like 2 rifles on either side of his leg as a splint. Like, because we know grabby hands exist. I'm not surprised you wouldn't be able to. Can you see where I'm going with this though? That could be
The reason I laughed is I just got this image of, we need to splint, the guy looking round, cut to the vandal corpse, the guy chopping his leg off, and just tying 2 of those to his leg. Right, we fixed it. You've got a splint. You're good.
But that could be a thing. I know it sounds crazy, but that could be really cool.
It is a thing in real life. The military trains for improvising things like that. But yeah,
improvised splints. So that could be a real thing. I think we've covered most of what I wanted to cover. We did have some outlying examples, so let's just go over those last now before we kind of wrap up. So kick us off the top with those. Can you see the ones in the notes, Osiris, or not? Exposure.
Yeah. So the first one we have is exposure. So in search and rescue, the reason that you have summoned people to rescue you is because there's some risk associated with being in your environment for a prolonged period of time. If there was no risk, then you wouldn't need a rescue. You take your time and find your way back to civilization. That risk probably looks like heat or cold exposure, or dehydration, or hypothermia, or something like that. And so not every person who receives this benefits of search and rescue personnel is necessarily going to have a specific injury, but they may have a medical condition or a developing condition that requires some sort of intervention like that.
So the examples we've got written down here are like exposure to hot and cold, dehydration, shock, and the interesting one that you came up with, Badger, was drug use. So that was different types of medications, yeah?
Yeah. And that, again, linking back to the Armor 3 Ace Medical example, is that when people do that in milsim communities, there's a set pattern, right? Hit them with this drug and then bandage them, then you hit them with that drug, and it's formulaic. There's no deviation from that. Whereas in this, because they've talked about, if you keep using med pens too long, you're going to become dependent. Actually, now there's going to be an extra level where you get to a casualty and you try and, whether there's a diagnosis tool or whatever, but that will change the whole format of how you treat. Therefore, if you're going in with someone that is not experienced in the medical gameplay, you've got every chance of making it worse, which, funny enough, is like real life. You go and help someone and go, I'm just going to stick them with whatever's in this vial. This will be fine, right? Dink.
Yeah. Send it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that sort of stuff's going to be really clever, because now you've got this, and it comes back to how all the gameplay is going to be genuinely skill-based. Because if you don't understand that being addicted to that substance is going to mean that you can't use these sorts of treatments, you're going to make stuff a whole lot worse than better.
Yeah. My brain's gone to a weird place with this, but I thought of this as you were saying that, is think about, when in some games where you have character creation and you have to pick a negative effect, right? What if a negative effect for someone is they're allergic to penicillin, as a real world example for today? So they could actually put that in, or there could be a quest where you are sent out on a quest and you don't know and something goes wrong, and all of a sudden it changes. It goes from just like this standard little medical search and rescue to like complete extreme. Oh shit, this guy's gonna die.
Yeah.
So even if it's not done in character creation, I could see that being used in a quest.
Sorry, go on, Osiris.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're going to inflict those type of things on players, but I think it's entirely possible that NPCs could have weird conditions like allergies, to your point, that you need to be thorough in your examination of to avoid exacerbating the situation. Because
What we've actually just
think about it, this is going to be 90% of the verse is NPCs. Most search and rescue is going to be for the benefit of some NPC.
Yeah, and what we've actually just done in effect is create medical contracts, not search and rescue contracts, medical. Because now you've got outposts somewhere in the back end of Beyond now has someone that's ill. They don't know what's wrong with them. They don't have the means to transport them. It's not a search and rescue thing. We need a doc. Please help. Don't know what's wrong with our boy.
And that puts one up for players to grab or an NPC to grab. Yeah, I totally can see that. And there are going to be, I was bitten by some alien space spider, and
now I stick to walls and stuff comes out of my hands, and
and I've got 8 eyes and they need fixing.
And I never graduate high school in 40 years.
All right, so then
I feel personally attacked by this.
The next one that you came up with, I thought was very cool for quests, so I'll let you take that one, which was Hoaxes. Yeah,
so something you don't tend to deal with in the military world, because I don't think there's a lot of people go, "Oh my god, I've been shot, haha, just kidding." Is there are people will hoax for various different reasons, and not a lot of them would make sense in the game. But the one that we came up with was, so you're running a growing pirate organization and now you need something medical. Wouldn't it be really good if we got ourselves an Apollo? Well, I don't want to buy one because I'm a pirate. That defeats the point of being a pirate. So you engineer a situation with a search and rescue element to it, and actually it's nothing about being rescued. It's about taking their medevac from them. So there's all sorts of, and I think that's going to feed quite nicely into also the whole idea of griefing, hot topic, because I know we've just had that over the last couple of weeks. But if they do Death of a Spaceman right, medics and search and rescue crews hopefully will be afforded the same sort of kind of respect that they get in the real world community, which is that I'm not going to shoot at them because one day I might need them. And you kind of then leave them alone.
It could also go the other way, and they also need to be escorted just like a miner or a cargo hauler or anything like that. So it's more work for combat people, which is great to see, because the more variety of that, I don't want to do cargoing today, I'm going to go help medical people. And also think, like, as you mentioned before, different laws in different systems, like Pyro might need a lot more protection than, say, Stanton would.
Absolutely.
All right. Now this one was put up by one of our supporters, so I'll let one of you guys put this. He called it stupid people. I wrote it as people that don't even know they're lost or in danger. Trying to be polite. So which one of you would like to take that one?
Osiris, be my guest, please. I insist. After you.
Well, there are people who, for whatever reason, they have a very cavalier attitude about life. They don't necessarily do their due diligence. Like, so in Australia, you have the outback. Here we have deserts in the southwest. We have like Death Valley. We have the Grand Canyon. There are national parks where you can go for a hike, right? And a 10-mile hike down into the Grand Canyon is a different proposition than a 10-mile hike through your local forest. It comes with a lot different considerations that people don't necessarily always weigh or evaluate before they go on it. They think, oh, it's 10 miles. I walk 10 miles every day. Not a problem. But you're going downhill and you're going in the summer and it's like 130 degrees Fahrenheit there. And and by the time you know there's a problem, now you need to climb a significant elevation to get rescued. And they put signs in these locations to warn hikers of the dangers, but not everybody reads the sign or the warning, and then they find themselves in need of search and rescue.
I've got to ask Badger, how many people do you guys rescue, if you can talk about that, that are just like I just didn't think it was going to be like that. I was out of my element because I've got a feeling that would be a large number of people. Yeah, like they're like, oh, we were just going out for a rowboat or whatever, and they got sucked out to sea or whatever. Oh, I've never been at sea before. Like, is that really common?
All of them.
Okay.
That's why the job exists.
Yeah.
You get those people who are, and again, this will be explorers, but thinking about it in maritime terms, you get the people who are professional yacht crews.
Yeah.
And they know that when they sail into search, if something goes wrong, they are instantly in the situation where they're in need of rescue. If they get dismasted, the mast snaps, they are now in need of rescue. So you get that kind of like climbing Everest, right? You get up there, you don't go, oh, it's okay, we'll just walk back down. You might get to the point where you go, do you know what? We did everything right, but the situation's just turned against us, and now we need help. And then there are those that just go, oh, I had no idea. Yeah, all right, thanks. But it's interestingly, you raised that, and we kind of talked about this earlier, is the idea that maybe suits can have something that, something comes out of nowhere. You get one of these ice yeti things on Microtech. You have no idea it's sneaking up behind you, and all of a sudden it just punts you off a cliff. And, where am I supposed to open my Moby glass, go, I'm going to need rescue in about 20 seconds when I hit the floor?
It's kind of like those people trying to dial the phone and that they can't because they're unconscious. So
and it's kind of that being able to maybe buy something for your kit. Maybe it takes up a utility slot, maybe it's something else entirely new. But it's, look, if I flatline or if I go critical on my medical, I forget my vital signs, automatically beacon. And maybe it's not something that's really easy to find. It comes with a level of difficulty for people to locate you.
Or it's a part of an insurance package and it costs a bundle,
Yeah,
premium
absolutely.
insurance.
But something like that, because at least then if you're like, hey, this is really stupid, but I'm going to do it anyway.
So the thing that made me think of is Microtech sells in their store, their fake Apple store, they sell a range of the Moby glasses, right? Now, some of them probably have that functionality built in, maybe a higher end Moby glass.
Yeah,
will
the HUD
automatically notify search and rescue if you lose consciousness or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do know that they've talked about having parts in different suits as well. So like, say you're like a cold suit might have more utility slots than say just a normal, light, medium, or heavy or whatever. So yeah, I don't know where it's going to sit, but I do agree with what they just said there. It could definitely be part of a kit. So that's interesting. All right, so we're going to move on to the very last topic today before we round up. This has been a lot longer than I thought this was going to go. And that's going back to that thing that we said was going to be the last one, which is the good and the bad of broadcasting your distress call. So you came up with this, Badger, so I'll let you kind of start us off on this.
I think Osiris had the key part of this. If I punt it back down that way, other way, that way.
Other way.
Yeah.
All right. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows, folks. When you activate your service beacon for a distress call, you're broadcasting to the galaxy your location and the fact
you're in trouble. Oh, we're going to get a Speedy Gonzalez.
That you are helpless. Yeah. And that. Yeah, Speedy Gonzalez. So all sorts of unsavory characters can respond to that distress call. It's not necessarily the first responders that you want. It could be pirates. It could be Vandal. And there are considerations to make when you are pushing that button.
No, 100%. And I think that kind of highlights a little bit what I said previously about being escorted. I did not think, I kind of thought like you, Badger, where people respect medical personnel. Like in Australia, when the sirens go on, everyone drives off the side of the road to let them get there faster and stuff like that. I think it would be the same thing in like leaving a planet. Like if there was a gateway that you had to go through, like they would get first priority, stuff like that. But I still think there are going to be people that are going to take advantage. Like that's just how the world is. There are wild west areas in this game.
Those illegal salvage operations you were talking about before. Yeah. They may come in and say, vultures. "Oh, cool, a vehicle. I know there's a vehicle here that's disabled, can't defend itself."
Yep. The pirate stuff we talked about, and not just the people that will be in trouble. Because again, you gave an example of like a more expensive lock, like an 890 jump, where they're not going to want to leave their ship because they know that there's people there waiting for them to leave, so their ship they can just take the ship. Yeah, I totally see that as something that like there's actually, believe it or not, and I don't know, I believe I'm going there, but there's a psychological element. Like you said about you're literally going to have to put guns to people's heads in some cases to get them to get help. But I also think some people, and you might need a psychiatrist. You know, when you got someone's got to, because medical people turn up and there's like the guy's trying to jump off the building and someone's got to talk him down. Like, is there going to be mental health type gameplay? Like, I know that sounds weird, but can you see that as a quest where you turn up and it's not a medical one, but it's just one where you've got to talk the guy down from scuttling his own ship, or
Sure. Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
see that,
Yeah.
and that could be really interesting.
Yeah. People
Something I
can
was
act
thinking about.
strangely if they suffer a traumatic brain injury.
And also with Osiris talking about sort of, dehydration and all that sort of heat, the ability to hallucinate and see stuff that isn't there.
Yeah.
So maybe you do see a ship landed, so you go running towards it and you get there and it's not actually there. All of those things as an indication to the player that they are not well.
And it turns out you walk through some kind of viper's nest and they poisoned you, and the whole quest changes from you saving other people to you doing your own medical care and getting yourself out of there, and everyone else is already dead. They're gone. The whole, like, man, the depth of this gameplay is so much deeper than I thought it was going to be. I'm really
I didn't think
happy
I was going to want to do medical gameplay, but I'm kind of intrigued now.
well, I didn't think it was going to be as deep as this. My whole perception on medical has, and there goes my phone, completely changed. Like I now see the depth. It is way deeper than some of, like, it's like mining is shallow compared to medical, in my opinion. Now that is, it's crazy how deep this could be. Yeah,
and what really nicely leads into this, and this is kind of would be my final thoughts on it. So sorry if I've jumped the gun.
No,
but
that's where we're up to. Go for it.
It's all going to depend on death of a spaceman.
100%.
And if all of they're going to do is penalize us financially, I don't think that's going to work, because one of the things they're going to do, they think, is sell currency. So, it's all right. I've got some spare cash. I'm just going to couch the loss with real world money. That death of a spaceman is absolutely core. And I think we've said this with other games. If there's no penalty to tapping out, people won't wait for the medic. They'll just tap out.
So just respawn.
If you've only got if you've only got 5 lives, so to speak, man, you're gonna be pissed. You're gonna be sitting there for 10 minutes, but you'll do it. You'll be like, man, I do not want to tap out. I can see people yelling at Megs, "Come and get me, you bastard!" Like, I don't want to have to tap out. Like, it's going to be complete opposite of other games. And I don't know about you guys, but I think younger people are not going to like that because they're used to that instant. You know, think about all the downtime you have in first-person shooter games. Like you know, when you're in Counter-Strike and you're out for the round and you're just like, oh man, God, I'm tapping my feet. Come on,
that was so
just die already.
When I was younger.
Yeah, and that's like 2 or 3 minutes. But if you're waiting 10, 15 minutes for help, oof, you know, are they gonna have a mini game, like a dream state mini game?
Yeah,
I digress, but yeah.
But I tell you what, if it comes down to me losing the ship that I'm in and everything else, I'll wait 2 hours. I'll go clean the rabbit out. I'll sort loads of other stuff. Yeah. I'll wait. It's fine. I'll go as long as the timer will let me. And if I've got an option to extend it myself, I will. So,
I do think that kind of comes back to what Osiris said, though. Instead of the golden hour, he reckons we like the golden 10 minutes. I think it will be a lot more accelerated and gamified. So I do think.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Is there anything for your closing there, Osiris? Or are you? I think we're all on the same page. It's kind of good.
We're on the same page here. I agree.
Yeah, when it ends that way. All right.
Not going to beat a dead horse.
All right. Signing off with leave a hashtag Jag in the comments for your chance to win an F7A upgrade and Super Hornet. His mate's looking for a new home for his mate ship that unfortunately passed away. All right. Other than that, I don't often say this about episodes, but there are episodes I walk into and I do not know how they're going to go. And this went fantastic. I was really reserved, like, where this was going to go. In fact, about a year and a half ago, we planned to do a medical versus repair episode that just we never got around to doing, and I feel this would have been very similar to where that went. And I now want to do an episode on repair, just from the fact that we've done this one today, just see where that goes. So maybe look forward to that at a later date. Badger, can you please tell people where they can find you on the YouTube? And there was a really great video you did about the timeline of Star Citizen that I highly recommend people watch as well. Yeah,
The video that terrified me to put up. Yeah, I'm on YouTube under Drinkers with Gaming Problems. Come find us. I'm only on there at the moment. And there's a video called "Why Years Don't Matter," or "The Years Don't Matter, Here's Why," which has started a bit of a fight amongst the community. I understand. I keep seeing it linked, which is great. Also, as a closing word, the Cutlass Red is an ambulance.
Okay, cool. Osiris, where can people find you too? Because you've got a channel as well, mate. So where can they find you?
Oh boy, do I? I forgot. It's been so long. Yeah, I'm on YouTube. Osiris Frost. Look for the green skull logo. And it's been a while since I've made content for my own channel. I have a busy job, busy family, and I'd like to get back to it at some point. So any support you can give me to bridge the gap in time until I have that opportunity, I'd appreciate.
Yep. But yeah. All right. And you can find me right here. Other than that, he's been Drinkers with Gaming Problem, or Badges as we've Australian nicknamed him, and Osiris Frost. I've been Execute.
Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, join us on Discord.
All that stuff. Yeah, we got to fix
in the description below.
We've got to fix my fleet coming up with you. Do we not, Badger? From yeah, we do. So look forward to that towards Invictus. And the other person I have that will be around Invictus is Grim from Star Jump, where he's got his cinematic coming out very soon for Invictus. I'm looking forward to that. You might have seen the preview of my Reclaimer, but I've sucked a couple other people in from all over the place.
Now you'd rather have your logo on an Apollo after this episode. Tell the truth.
No. I might have to get badges on there. We'll see. All right. And I guess we'll catch you in the next one. All right, we're out.